Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Wanted to welcome everybody to the second session of our e-commerce workshops. We heard last month from Anna and Earl, and talking a little bit about the initial stages of evaluating an e-commerce business. And today we're going to get into a little bit on the business planning side, and we're titling this one "E-commerce Planning for Success." If you're able to join us last month, you saw the group here, and definitely wanted to just say another thank you to Erin Aus for putting this together. Without her efforts, we wouldn't have been able to have this organized. So thanks to Erin, 10 at the top, for putting the leadership here and getting the team together. I'll just take a moment to introduce and let Anna and Earl introduce themselves. But we got Anna Para from the Community Works Women's Business Center, and Earl Gregorich from the South Carolina SBDC. So each of you, if you want to just take a moment to introduce yourselves, and we can go from there.
Sure, Jerry. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Anna Para, like Jerry said. I am with the Community Works Women's Business Center. We are one of the SBA resource partners here and located in the upstate of South Carolina, and serve 15 upstate counties. I don't know if they're technically all in the upstate. I haven't done the map matching yet. But we do serve all those, mainly Greenville, Spartanburg, and Anderson at the moment, but are venturing into some other counties. We provide similar resources and technical assistance to our other SBA partners, but of course with a very intentional focus on women entrepreneurs, especially women of color. So we are excited to be a part of this series and to continue to work with our SBA partners. And I'll hand it off to Earl.
Thank you, Anna. I'm the area manager for the Greenville office here at the Small Business Development Center. Our footprint at SBDC is very close to the 10 at the top footprint, so we're serving pretty much the same area. Much like SCORE, we serve the small business community. We provide services through one-on-one consulting, training programs like this that we're having today, and resource connections. So we're very much in tune with small business and entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we're here to do the best that we can to help you start, grow, and sustain your small business. Welcome.
All right, fantastic. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, so who will this benefit? And there's a variety of people that each of you may be at different stages of your e-commerce business. Some of you may be just starting, and others may have been doing this for a little while. And each one of you has some unique challenges that you may be looking at or currently facing. And therefore, basically anybody watching, as long as you have some interest in starting an e-commerce business, should gain some benefit from today's workshop. We actually have quite a bit to cover, but we're the three of us who are all here to help, and we're looking forward to for some Q&A throughout. So feel free to put those questions right into the chat as we go along, and we'll stop and we'll answer. We'll also try to set up some time at the end. One thing we can do now is if you could put in just a few words about the type of e-commerce business you may be thinking about starting, and just keep it very simple, maybe 2 or 3 words like pet supplies or bakery goods or something like that. So as we get into particular areas and want to talk about examples, we may be able to focus on those categories if you could do that. So this is a slide that I stole from Anna and Earl from last month, because I think it's relevant and we need to readdress it as we get into the planning side, and that there's multiple degrees of e-commerce that your business may be in, from basically online informational support that's really just for an offline business. There's hybrid type where it's a combo. Really getting in there in your full service online, really the typical e-commerce business that we think about, where it's shopping cart, inventory, fulfilling orders. And then finally, this fourth category here, where it's a combo, but you're outsourcing and you're doing some drop shipping and using third parties to help with the fulfillment. So obviously, the business planning details will depend on the method of e-commerce that your business employs. So keep that in mind as we talk about things and we go into certain aspects of it. You may think, well, that doesn't necessarily go particularly with my version of e-commerce. We may need to tweak that a little bit for depending on which method that you're going to be employing. And what makes e-commerce unique? Did a little bit of research on this, and it was multiple, but I brought this down to four that I thought was important to sort of touch on. The first, I talk about ubiquity, which is defined as the fact of appealing everywhere or being very common. And customers are not limited to a physical location, of course. The other thing is the reach or the accessibility, really from anywhere in the world. You also are able to work with universal standards. So we have social media platforms, so whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and that you're out there and you're using similar ways of digital marketing, or the shopping carts themselves, whether it's Shopify or something else. There's sort of a universal look and feel to that the customers are aware of. And the final is personalization, and allows your business to adjust based on each customer's interest in past purchases. So those are the things that we love and hate at the same time, right? These are the little cookies that follow us around on the internet, but at the same time, it allows that e-commerce entrepreneur to take advantage of that information that they're aware of and customize the view or the ability to present that information to their customers. So as I put at the bottom here, although all businesses require a similar planning methodology, the items I just listed above, they're unique to e-commerce. So keep these in mind as we get into the planning details. So what is business planning? And I really like using the verb there, planning versus plan, the noun, is because when we talk about business plan, initially, the entrepreneurs, their eyes might gloss over a little bit. There's a little bit of anxiety that comes in almost immediately. You start thinking about this, this whole big booklet or something that needs to be put together. But if we really think about it, they can take a step back and say, well, of course I got to do some business planning, right? We're gonna start a new business or continue on with something that's already underway. A planning methodology should be there to take advantage of that. So, really, what is it? It's a roadmap that outlines how a business will achieve its goals. And why do we do it? Well, this is a quote from Yogi Berra. It says, "If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else." So it's of course. And when should it be done? Well, ideally before you start, but it's something that should be updated continually. Who's involved? It depends on the size of the company, but really the entrepreneur has to lead the process. And how can it be done? It can be done with a traditional planning methodology, or where most of us are leaning towards today is through some sort of business modeling tool. And that's what we're going to talk about in this workshop. We're going to go into what we call the lean canvas. And the difference here from a traditional business plan over on the left, that multi-page book, sometimes it's hard to see the relationships. That contains a lot of information, especially detailed financial projections, which may or may not be realistic depending on the stage that the business is in. And once it's put together, unfortunately, it's rarely reviewed or modified. Versus over on the right, we look at the business modeling, lean canvas template, a single page, a poster, a whiteboard. This can be done in a lot of different ways. I've seen clients that load it into a spreadsheet. It's easier from that way. It could just be taking out a yellow sheet of paper and breaking it down into those 12 blocks. But the idea is to simplify it, to make it less intimidating, but at the same time, be able to focus on these key aspects, which especially the customer and strategic marketing aspects, which are looking at things through the customer's eyes. And on this slide, I think I'm going to just pause for a second because I can't see the Q&A and want to make sure. Are we good so far? Is anybody good questions at this stage?
Jerry, I think you're good. I just wanted to add that I know my clients really appreciate Score's the Canvas template. That, like you said, it really does simplify the process.
Great. So what I ended off there is the focusing on the customer. So we talk about is an external focus, and in contrast to that, an internally focused one is one in which the systems and the processes matter. They really matter the most. So you'll think about that as rigidity. So they're inflexible. They often expect their partners and their customers to conform to the way that they're doing things. That's an internally focused company versus an externally focused company. We focus on the customer and emphasize what their needs are, and really think about customer experience. So you see the little photo off on the right for e-commerce. That's making sure you've got a nice mobile version to be able to get in there, making it as flexible, as easy as possible for them to be able to navigate and see what they're going to be evaluating, and just streamlining the process, make it easy so that you're approaching everything through the customer's eyes. So the other thing we talk about is, go ahead. Yeah.
Interject something there. It seems like we should be far enough down the path now to not have to mention the fact that you need to be sure you're emphasizing that your website is mobile friendly. And unfortunately, what we have is we do still have some small businesses out there, and larger businesses for that matter too, that don't have mobile friendly websites. It's a situation where the technology has surpassed the capability for the website to keep up. And if you don't have somebody internal just monitoring this, you're falling behind and not even realizing it. It's not until a client takes the time to make it a point to you that it's not working, because most of our small businesses don't go out on their website every single day to check and make sure all the functions that used to work a year ago still work this year. So if you're not doing that as a small business, you really should go out, buy something off your website, navigate around the website like a client, pull a client aside and ask them, next time they're on the phone, they're saying, hey, I'm looking at this on your website, and say, oh, by the way, how do you like our website? Did you find anything there that didn't work for you? And so on. Those are really important things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as we're saying, it's viewing it through your customer's perspective. And now Earl has a great point. Go in there and be a customer. Actually go in there, navigate and buy something. So see how that feels. And if it's not mobile friendly and you're trying to do that from a phone, it's you're going to be pinching and trying to zoom in on the screen, and it's not a fun experience. So I'm sure we've all seen it and been there. So the other thing we talk about is having one idea per plan. And what I put over here on the right is create a separate plan, but for things that are significantly different. So in other words, for every little nuance of your product offering, you don't need to create a separate plan. But in the example here, it's let's say you're an IT e-commerce company, and part of your business is selling computers and accessories through a typical storefront, or virtual e-Shopify or something like that storefront. And then you also happen to offer virtual consulting services. I could say those are different enough. One's a product sales, one's a service oriented. They may be better off broken out and creating two canvases to explore the ideas on each. So keep that in mind. This is a sort of a quick overview of what the template looks like. And it's broken up so that there is a flow to it from 1 to 12. And what I've done is you'll see that there's 3 boxes there that I put second pass. And this is really just from some experience with clients. They found that they get a little hung up on those 3. And it's been easier to, if they do get hung up, just to skip over those 3 boxes if they do, and come back to them on the second pass, because a lot of times you've answered questions that may have been a little bit of a roadblock. That becomes easier once you get through the other ones to jump back and answer those. And what we're going to do through the most of the rest of the workshop is we're going to go through these blocks one at a time and sort of see what we're trying to accomplish on each one of them. So the first, what the Lean Canvas is calling is the customer problem. And I think that word is a little too strong sometimes, the problem word. It's really just an underlying need, or maybe even sometimes a want. It's really, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to fulfill for that customer? And we'll say that the business itself, it's going to require more than just a great idea. We need to determine if the offering will fulfill, really an underlying need, and something that, and again, it could be something as simple as, we're selling, bakery items, and the need is that, I really want a treat on a Saturday night or something like that. So it's something that it's real, but it doesn't have to be, solving world peace in terms of, coming up with a real underlying problem. But it's identifying what that is, and, trying to find out what you're trying to solve. So what I have in red there is that if we can't really truly identify what that need is, then we really don't have a product or service to sell. That's the first thing, is really focusing on that. And then, your definition of the problem as seen through the customer's eyes, going back to what we're talking about, sort of externally focused, keeping that viewpoint from your customer's perspective. And take some time here. The block number one, defining what the underlying problem or need is, it's pretty important, because everything else drives from that, and it really saves some confusion later when you try to understand what you're trying to do. Look at the quote over there from Albert Einstein. It says, if I only had 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. So that's what we're trying to hit on here, is what are we trying to achieve?
And Jerry, there's a few things with regards to e-commerce that you have to your advantage when it comes to that, and that's in the statistics you can tell pretty quickly whether or not you've identified that problem correctly and you're solving that problem. If you've identified the problem correctly, your bounce rate will be lower than if you've not. And if you are solving the problem correctly, you will have fewer cart abandonments, and you will have a longer time spent on the website. So if you're watching just those three analytics right there, those can help you identify whether or not you're doing that very first step correctly.
Oh, that's super interesting. I haven't really thought about it from that perspective. And it's, I think we'll see throughout some of these other blocks that there are some really nice, unique aspects to e-commerce that modify this process a little bit, but give that ability to see things that may not be readily available in a typical brick and mortar business. So yeah, thanks, Earl. That's awesome.
Good. And Jerry, I wanted to point out as well, excuse me, that Fred has put in information about his company. He's going to have an online company selling personal collectibles, and he's got his website under development. So, so anybody else out there, if you would like to put in what you're working on, that would be helpful to be able to provide some specific examples.
Perfect.
And also, is there a question for you, Jerry? Is there a link or something where people can find the lean canvas?
Yeah, what we'll do is actually later on today or tomorrow, we'll email out a template to everybody, so they'll have that one that I have is in a Word document. It works pretty well. It's easy to edit, but like I said, it's you can also take this and recreate it in a spreadsheet or a lot of different ways. But we'll get something out to everybody, so they'll have a basic tool they can jump right into.
Good, and a copy of the presentation.
Yep.
Okay, great.
It'll go out as well. And in fact, this is being recorded, and I hope to have it up on our YouTube channel later on this week, and I'll send a link out to that as well.
Good. And I see that Nicoya's doing locally handmade bath and body products. So good.
Okay.
Good mix of products.
Okay, thanks, Erin. So the next part that we'll talk a little bit about is customer segments. And that's really just identifying that not everybody has the problem you're trying to solve. So the last one, Erin, you just mentioned, was it bath and body products? Is that what you said? Did I get that correct? So okay, so you may be appealing a little bit more to I would assume to females in that particular one, and maybe a certain age group, and maybe your products are specifically geared towards a specific demographic. Maybe they're not, but you can start to segment a little bit and start to think about back to that first block. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then looking at it a step further and say, who has that problem? And that's what we're trying to get to here. And then we say that there's only a small fraction that are actually really good potential customers that have an immediate need. And I put location in quotes, and I'll get back to that in a second, and readiness to buy. You know, in a typical business, we would be thinking about location. Hey, we're walking down, we're in downtown Greenville, and we walk by the store and would say, hey, we're in the location, and this is a great opportunity to walk in and perhaps you know, browse the store and buy something. E-commerce is a little different. So what we mean by location there is, did they get to your site? You know, how did your digital marketing and your social media and your SEO and all of that create it so that the customer is actually at your location, meeting on your website, and ready to actually make that purchase. So it's a little unique here, but think about that. Thinking about who makes the buying decision versus who actually uses the products. And a good example here is if you looked at a child and a parent, and then you started looking at things like toys or candy or something like that and saying, all right, who's the product for, but who's actually making the decision to purchase that product? And that could influence, again, how you're going to be you're promoting that through your social media or other digital marketing tools. And don't assume that you know your customers' needs, without interacting with them. And typically what that means on the e-commerce side is trying to get in there, get some direct feedback whenever possible. It's sort of a one-way communication a lot when you're doing your digital marketing, but if you get some response or you see somebody, try to do some direct messaging. You want to hear real live feedback from as many customers as you can, and trying to initiate those. In the virtual world, it's a little different. It'll probably be short little messages, direct messages, emails, that kind of thing. But it's really still good to see that and be able to make some modifications. And like I said in the next bullet point here, be prepared to adapt based on that feedback. The quote I put here is from Tony Robbins: "The biggest mistake most businesses make is falling in love with their product or service, not with their clients." So think about that with customer segments.
Jerry, I'll add to that. In my experience, I've seen several instances where smaller businesses, especially 1-2 person shows, they have a tendency to say, well, I got a website, I can go hide behind the curtain, turn off the phone, and just wait for the orders to come in. Mm-hmm. And that is certainly not the case. People still want that one-on-one communication.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's almost like the ordering of it, right, Earl? Meaning that you have to create a sort of a critical mass of followers and customers. And you have to do that usually a little bit more through the traditional means of reaching out and creating that social interaction as you're describing. And then once you get that critical mass, then the referrals and everything start to do what you're saying. And now it starts to feed on itself. But yeah, until you get there, guys, you really have to really embrace that some of the traditional methods as well, getting out there and communicating.
I will say that when I ran my own websites, my own e-commerce sites, I can't tell you how many times I had a client tell me, I'm going to go ahead and buy off of your website, and the only reason I'm doing that is because you picked up the phone. Nobody else would.
Yep. Great point. Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that everybody should just pause and really listen to what Earl's saying there. It's so critical, and he's absolutely right. We see it a lot. Thinking be able to start a business, create a website, create a Facebook page, and miraculously everybody's just going to show up and start ordering. Sometimes that could happen, but usually not. Usually there's some real behind the scenes boots on the ground sales and marketing that goes along with it. So let's chat a little bit about pioneer adopters. These are the customers that already recognize the need for your product or service, but they're sufficiently dissatisfied with the current offering. And so they're open to to alternatives. And that could be something as simple as it may not be the offering itself, but it might be the ability to offer that offering through an e-commerce platform, which could create the early adopters. In other words, hey, they're used to going out onto Woodruff Road and going to this particular specialty retail store, but today you come up with that same thing, but you put that on an e-commerce platform, and it's just easier, and they don't have to fight the traffic. And so again, they're sufficiently dissatisfied to say, I'm going to give that a shot. So that's what we're thinking about there. And whereas others that are non-Pioneer adopters, they might have to have a little reassurance that that there's no risk for your product or service. And you're really trying to look at what can you do to get those early adopters on board. And what I put here in red at the bottom is interestingly, with e-commerce, they may actually find you, which is, in other words, if you're coming up with a fairly unique product or service and you have a particular segment in mind, and you start promoting it towards that, and all of a sudden you get requests from something that's slightly different, and maybe you weren't aware of it, but you're like, wow, there's this other sort of sub segment out there of Pioneer adopters that you didn't realize that that product or service would be of value to. And it's an interesting aspect of the internet world where that kind of stuff can find you where may not happen otherwise. So yeah, and this is the first one that I put down for second pass, because clients sometimes struggle with this one, but don't want to put too much into it, but something to certainly think about. So from here, we go into what the existing solutions are. And this is basically, you're looking at both your direct and indirect competition. So, we put indirect here, we say, including the traditional brick and mortar establishments. So indirect competitors look to satisfy the same need, but with a different product or service. So let's say you're, the example I have here, let's say you're an e-commerce business and you're doing these gourmet pizzas. They're going to be frozen and they're going to be shipped. And you got these, these great options, and you built an e-commerce business around that. An indirect competitor might be the local, fresh market or somebody that has something similar. But again, now you're indirectly competing because you're offering the e-commerce solution there. And what alternatives does the customer currently have to resolve her problem? So that's taking a look and seeing what's currently out there. Again, back to the title, existing solutions. And are these solutions reliable, readily available, and affordable? So those are some ways that you can look at your offering and saying, can I make it better in some capacity? And are any of these existing solutions addressing the problem that you outlined in the first block? And the little bubble I put on the side over here is, keep this in mind. The problem still exists, even if your business is not there to provide a solution. That's how you can start to really understand what that need or that solution is, because thinking about your business not being there, it doesn't take away the fact that underlying need or want or problem still exists. So it helps to redefine that or better define that block number one, which sort of segues into what your particular solution is. And so clearly define it, honestly assess the solution against your problem, and then get objective feedback. And what I put here is especially from prospective customers. And that's a little different than asking your friends or your family. It's trying to really get out there again, trying to get a little bit of feedback maybe through social media. Try to do some direct messaging, seeing if you can get some real feedback from prospective customers that you don't really know, that are willing to give you some honest feedback on your product, your service, maybe even on your overall site. And how does your solution differ from the existing solutions? Try to think of at least one benefit there. Also, when you're thinking about your benefits, you also want to see, and be honest with yourself, what perhaps are the shortcomings, and how would you mitigate those? Knowing that there's always going to be shortcomings, but being able to address them to your customers is pretty powerful, because you can sort of show them what you're able to do in the long run.
I want to add something to that, Jerry. The differentiation factor is extremely important when you're online. There's so much noise online. It's so difficult to capture the eye, to engage that client. So make sure you're spending a little bit of extra time, and let's say a lot of extra time, on that differentiation factor when it comes to your website. And sometimes that can be as simple as simply listening to what the client is calling your product and service. You are making it, you are producing it, you're putting it on the website, you're describing it, but your client may call it something completely different, or they may use a buzz phrase that you're not familiar with, or they may call it something that their group refers to it as. You need to cue in on some of those because that's what they probably are looking for in the Google search box when they're trying to find you. So differentiation is not always internal. It may be something you pick up from your client base as you listen to them.
Great. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good point, Earl. And Jerry, I wanted to kind of reinforce the understanding the problem, because when I had my online vegan gift basket business, what I found is that by understanding the problem, that became my product descriptions.
Mhm.
And generally in doing what Earl said, listening to what people said, people would call in and they'd say, oh, I don't know what to give my vegan friend, or you know, my child has become vegan, or they're bringing somebody for dinner who's vegan. And so the description started with looking for a vegan gift and you have no idea. We have the answer. You know, it was, so listening to what their real problems were the beginning of those descriptions, because those product descriptions are so vitally important in pointing out why your product is different than someone else's too, as Earl said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great example, Aaron. Thank you. It's yeah, I love that. It so clearly defines exactly what we're talking about, getting fairly specific as to what that offering is, identifying what that underlying need, want, or perhaps problem is, and then being able to build the rest of your planning around that. And I hope everybody can see as we're going along that it really isn't that difficult to do this, but it does take a little bit of time to really take a step back for each one of these questions. And they're really just bullet point answers. Nobody needs to write paragraphs about any one of these topics, but you want to be clear on each one of them. And to do this right, it probably takes an hour, at the most 2 hours, to do your planning doc. So it's not going to take a ton of time, but it's something you want to really focus on and try to create a little bit of blocked out time where you're not going to be interrupted. Let's jump into.
Gary, I'm sorry, can I add one more thing that we tell folks when looking at online? So something to that unique factor that can't be forgotten is the personalization, who you are. A lot of times people forget to put a little bit about who they are and focus on the product, when while it might be online, people still want to connect with who the person is behind the product. Many times they're looking for that connection to support your business. So we always encourage folks to put a little bit about themselves and why they got into it and why they're doing what they're doing. They're looking for that story just as much as they are looking at the product.
Yeah, and that's especially important to, I noticed a few of our audience members today fall into that creatives category. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're an artist or you're creative type, people buy as much because it's you as they do the product itself. They want to know the artist. They want to know the story behind the artist. So when their friends and family ask them about, well, where'd you get that unique candle, or where'd you get that unique painting that's on the wall? They can tell the story about the artist. That means as much, if not more, to them than the product itself.
Sure, and the other thing is that we typically think of e-commerce mostly as product based, but you certainly can be providing service as well through an e-commerce platform. And when it's a service, you are the product, right? So it's if you're providing some sort of consulting, IT consulting, website design, accounting, or something. So that's so critical to be able to explain who you are, your background, a little personalization to that. So thanks, Anna. Yeah, appreciate that.
And one of the things that I found too is that people will think they know you. They'll read about you and they'll think they'll know you, and they'll call you and they'll talk to you like you've been friends forever. But they are your customer and you are one-on-one, no matter where they are in the world. And so you have to treat them the same way. And it's a little disconcerting at first, but that's one of the beauties of e-commerce. It is so one-to-one. You and the customer are right there with each other. So Anna, thank you for bringing that up too.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll chat a little bit about unique value proposition, and this is another one that I say sometimes come back to on the second pass, and it's really simplifying it, listing the features and benefits of your offering, and why should customers buy from you. And this third one is something I sort of emphasize. It's differentiation is absolutely critical, but we got to make sure that the difference matters. So you want to really think about what are you doing and how does that difference, tackle that first problem. The example that Aaron gave is still perfect because you can see how the differentiation went right into the underlying need. So they were sort of one and the same. So when you can get that, then you really know that you've clicked on this unique value proposition. You highlight customer benefits over product features and avoid hype. So that's what that one's all about. So we get into the competitive advantage. It's something that you really want to be able to think of and what the offering does versus your competition. And ideally, it's something that's not easily copied or bought. And can you protect it? So that'd be things like, intellectual property, patents and stuff like that. But, maybe not, depending on what the particular offering is. But things that we'll talk about as competitive advantages might be a unique talent or a skill or some sort of formulation. Go back to the sort of the bath products. Those might be just wholesale retail, or maybe there is some sort of specialty formula that you've created. And you have a niche there. Or perhaps you have an exclusive vendor relationship that others just don't know about, and you have these great products that are produced somewhere else, but you've got the niche there. Nobody else knows who they are, or you've negotiated a price that other customers can't, and that gives you an advantage. Geographical advantage we usually think of as brick and mortar when we're talking about geographical, but keep in mind, even with e-commerce, larger items, those shipping costs can add up. So I don't know if anybody's ever been online and tried to shop for something that has significant shipping costs, and you look and say, well, that vendor is out in California and it's going to cost $100 to ship it over, but I can get this same one over here in North Carolina, and it's only a $30 shipping cost or something, and it becomes an advantage, even though it's still e-commerce. Depending on the size of that item and the shipping cost, it could be. Flexibility, the ability to fulfill small orders, that's another advantage. And brand recognition. So before the launch of the business, maybe you started off more as a hobbyist and you've built up thousands of Instagram followers. And now you move this into an e-commerce business and you've got this competitive advantage. You've got brand recognition. So just something to think about, and it's again, how you differentiate your competitive advantage is important. So we used to call this one elevator speech, and it's definitely ties more to the face-to-face. So I'm relabeling it here for our purpose for e-commerce. I'm going to bring this to talking about the front page of the website. And I guess that could be any other initial communication. So it could even still be your your front of your Facebook page and that kind of thing as well. But you no longer have 30 seconds. You have more like 5 seconds to capture their attention and their buying interest. Highlight the problem or the need you're trying to solve, and then you'll get down into that actual problem and put yourself in the customer's shoes. That's what we were talking about early on. So the main point of this slide is that, and I think Earl mentioned it on the first webinar, is that we have very little time now on this new format, and in the e-commerce world, you're going to look at you, evaluate you quickly, and you want to be able to convey that message as quickly as possible within a few seconds.
I want to add to this. Don't always assume that the front page is the front page, because you are receiving clients into the website at all different levels and from all different angles. So Google may send them directly to a product page, or they may send them to your About Us page. They're not always going to enter in on the home page. So for that reason, you have to be able to prove that you have the solution in that 5-second period on every single page of the website. So I tell my clients, when you're putting a website together, think of every single page as if it was its own standalone website. Does it give all the basics? Name, address, phone number, how do I contact, how do I buy, what's the next thing I need to do, what's my call to action? If all those things are not on every single page, chances are you're losing out on some of your customer traffic.
Mhm. Exactly. Thanks, Earl. So now we're going to get into, sort of we used to be called the 4 Ps of marketing, or the marketing mix. And what this lean canvas and business modeling has done is simplified it. And we've broken them up into the first section we're now going to call channels, which focuses on those 2 over there, which are promotion and placement. And this is how do we get the product or service in front of our customers. So how will you promote it? So those are going to be things like your website SEO. Are you going to go with paid ads? How are you going to take advantage of social media? What platforms are the most effective for your particular product, service, and also the audience and the target market you're going after. So, is Instagram going to be better versus Facebook, or Pinterest? You have to really look at the demographic of your customer and the offering you're putting out there to help determine which might be the most efficient and effective there. And so particular for e-commerce, we have other things that are in this channels category that are very specific. So we've got things like demand planning. This can sneak up on you really quickly. You start off with the idea, you do a great job with your planning, you launch, some sales start to come through, a few weeks go by, and all of a sudden you're inundated. So that's great, but we want to make sure we get some demand planning that are in place in terms of how do you scale this. Warehousing may or may not come into play, in that same type of category. How do you manage your inventory? Then you get into things like logistics and distribution, shipping, and particularly shipping fees. Also brings into how you're going to handle returns and managing them. So, there's some unique components to this retail e-commerce part that you want to take a step back and just do a little bit of planning before you launch, and think about how you may need to address these as the business scales. And then, are there any clever ways to partner or outsource? And you remember we talked many slides back about the perhaps even looking at outsourcing for the warehousing and fulfillment. So those are always options that you can look at and see what makes sense for you and your business.
Good. And we had kind of in terms of outsourcing, there is a question about shipping.
Mm-hmm.
Nicoya said that they want to offer, that they're having a problem. They're a super small business and having an issue finding a solution for shipping for our local customers. They want to be fair and offer convenience to the customers, but they're not able to deliver because they have full-time jobs. Are there solutions or steps to help us think through that? And the ideal situation would be having a storefront, but we are not at that stage yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that those partnerships, and when you talk about the distribution, this is a great question.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to combine into a few things as we go through the next few slides, because if I understand the question quite right, I'm not so sure it's the shipping, but probably the cost of shipping. So in other words, hey, we want to be fair to our customers. We'd love to be able to go out there and deliver this stuff pretty much for free, it sounds like. But the solutions we have now are probably dropping it in the mail, paying the U.S. Postal Service or UPS or something, and it's a smaller item, and maybe those shipping costs outweigh the value. So that's something we'll have to really think about as we get into building up the costs of a particular product or service, looking at the pricing, which we'll talk a little bit here on the revenue streams. And it all combines together. I don't have a particular answer for that. I don't know if Anna or Earl, if you know any other particular shipping solutions that would provide that. I almost think we need to redesign or design the business around that need. But go ahead, Earl. What are your thoughts?
I was going to suggest you might look into some fulfillment services that could do the shipping and send the product out upon receiving order off the website. You could either have it directly sent to the fulfillment house, or you could send it after vetting that order. The other thing that you might consider doing is enlisting a few stores around the area to consign your product, that you can send clients to those stores for pickup. And of course, I saw on your website that you list the events that you're going to be at, and offer the ability for customers to pick up at the event that you're going to be at after they place the order. So those are three good ways to handle that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah, and Lainey, in the chat, Lainey Alverson made some suggestions too, but there's also, stamps.com, which even if you can find ways to send things through a carrier that's not necessarily the main post office, and you can also request them to pick it up at your house. You can put it at a safe place, like on a back porch or something, and they will come pick it up, so you don't have to go to the post office every day. And you can also just charge maybe a flat fee for that shipping, maybe $4.99 rather than the actual cost of the shipping. And so you may have to eat some of the cost, or you may make $1 or $2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's sort of what I was thinking in terms of how do we structure the pricing and understanding the cost, and looking at the shipping in that case as part of the cost of goods, or in other words, what does it cost to produce this, which is in a typical e-commerce business. If it's wholesale retail, it's buying that product, marking it up, and selling it. But if there's some additional shipping fees that are going to come in there, you've got to realize that, and that's part of the costing of getting that available to your customer. But yeah, Earl, those are great alternatives. I wasn't aware of those, and those are great ideas. So we get into the actual revenue side of it, and it's really simple. How is your company going to generate cash? And this is a little bit more straightforward with e-commerce. We usually can see it. We usually can visualize the shopping cart, and we're either filling out a form, literally putting things into the shopping cart if they're products, or if it's service, we're putting in some information in terms of which offering we're going to sign up for, and then there's some sort of credit card information typically, and we hit a submit button. So we can start to see how that rolls out in an e-commerce business a little bit more clearly than some of the traditional ones. But the second point here, it's still valid. Charge appropriately from day one. This is something that most entrepreneurs struggle with. They want to go in and initially sell at a low price, or they feel like, hey, that's the only way I can create competitive advantage is to be the low cost provider. That's really not true. You want to really take a good look and see what's out there. You have to be price market appropriate. You certainly don't want to be, probably not anyway, at the absolute top end. I mean, maybe if you truly have a superior product or service, you do decide to go that way. But most likely you want to be somewhere in the middle. And the third bullet point here is consider that price is part of that product or service. In other words, it's part of your characteristic. If you're selling a product and is really at the low end of the range, especially if it's something unique and custom, people are going to look at that as an inferior product. They're going to say, why is it at the low cost? There must be something that's putting it there. So keep that in mind when you're trying to set your price. It defines who your customer is as well. So not only the product, but who's going to be drawn towards that particular product. That price range may affect that. And getting paid is the first form of validation. Somebody's literally able to or willing to go into your shopping cart, add that item, put their credit card information, and press submit. That's the ultimate validation. They actually purchased your product. So we want to also try to measure these a little bit and quantify them. So that's sort of like unit sales per month, or if it's a consulting business, how many hours. What are you actually selling? So, services, maybe your online nutrition plans. It's an e-commerce, typical e-commerce store. It could be pet supplies and items. Something that's a little bit more data driven. So you're doing an e-newsletter. let's say it's something related to the real estate market, and you put it out monthly, and there's a subscription plan for it. So there's different ways to generate revenue. And if you remember way back on, I think the third or fourth slide, we talked about maybe having a separate plan depending on how different those offerings are. So let's talk a little bit about cost structure. This is the one of two slides that I have that get into the numbers a little bit. We got to be aware of them, and it's something that you're going to have to really go into outside of the lean canvas a little bit. The lean canvas is going to help you identify the major ones, but you start to get a little bit more serious about the planning process. It does require to get into these a little bit deeper. But let's do a cursory overview, for this workshop, so you can see at least what how they're made up. And again, with the lean canvas, we're going to focus mostly on the marketing side, because that's really what we want to get right, is defining who that customer is, the problem we're trying to solve, and how we're going to be different. But in terms of the costs, they're broken up into a few categories. The first is the startup costs, which are the one-time costs that we need to get the business actually up and running. So they're also going to be the driver of any financing requirements you may need. So, and this might be your domain registration, cost that's going to go into the website design, and initial costing for software that you may need to get rolling. Also initial inventory to get get your inventory stocked up for starting the business out. You also, on top of that, what you look at is probably some working capital, which is just what you're going to need to get going for the first few months to cover some of the routine expenses, including some payroll. All of that together is going to define what those startup costs are. And if you do need financing, that's going to help guide towards what that financing amount is. The next category is the fixed or ongoing costs. And these are the things that are going to occur every single month. So you're probably going to have a few software as service things. It could be your shopping cart itself. It could be QuickBooks Online. It could be some CRM, whatever it is. In an e-commerce world, you're probably going to have some software subscriptions as ongoing. Your internet charge itself, and then digital marketing that you're doing routinely will be part of these fixed costs that recur every month. Versus your variable costs, they change based on how much you're selling. So these are going to be things like shipping, returns, and if you're doing any pay-per-click type of advertising, those are a little bit more variable. You're hoping that those translate, so that if you're paying those fees, they're translating into to better sales, which may or may not be the case, but you hope that's the intention when you're putting that out there. So I would view them as variable costs. And then finally, the cost of goods, and this mainly applies to products that you're going to be manufacturing. But like I said, in the e-commerce world, if we look at the typical retail wholesale, I would put the costs that you're looking at to acquire your inventory, and then any extra shipping costs or any extra packaging costs that might go along with that as sort of your cost of goods. So in other words, it's subtracting off what does it cost you to acquire that those items, and from what the actual sales price is. So you'll have the sales price on your website, but then you'll sell an item. If it was gift baskets, you have all of the things that went into it, the packaging that went around to make it look nice, and then you have the actual cost that you had on the website for the purchase. So when you subtract those two, we get what we call the gross profit, and that's what we're trying to get here is what did you actually generate for gross profit off of that unit sale. And those are the four sort of main categories of the cost structure. And let me pause for a second, because this could get a little detailed, and see if anybody has any questions on this. Okay, we're good. I'm gonna go on to the next one then.
There are a couple of questions.
I think there are questions.
Okay.
I was just saying, I think there's a couple of questions.
What do we got?
So we have for Fred, what's the best pay service, most popular? So I think going back to just thinking about those cost structures and recurring payments, if you all have any opinions. I think there's a variety, and everyone has kind of their own. I don't see that one sticks out. Earl or Jerry, or is one that has been more popular than others? And he says, go ahead, Earl.
I think you have to take some things into consideration. The number one consideration is what's the most convenient for your clients to use. The next one under that would be what works with your technology. So if you're using Shopify, you're going to have Shopify's platform. You can plug some other platforms into it. If you have your own website, homegrown cart, you can use PayPal or any of them. But the number one consideration is how do my clients want to pay, and what is the most popular? Because if you don't offer the right solution, they obviously can't close the deal. So you've got that consideration. Some of the back end fees involved and the ease with which to move the money around from platform to bank account and so on, those are also big concerns, because frankly, some of you are going to be operating on some very thin margins, and a 1 or a 2% fee may not sound like a whole lot, but you start taking that away from your already thin profit margin, and next thing you know, you're not making enough there to make it worthwhile.
Good point.
The other thing I was going to add is that you more than likely will have to have multiple pay services, or something that will include PayPal plus the credit cards plus American Express plus Visa, MasterCard. So it unfortunately isn't just one usually. But as Earl said, it's what the customers want, how they want to pay.
Yeah, and you consider that international market too. As Jerry said early on, you put a website out there, you are now exposed to the world. And if you want to sell into foreign markets, you have to be able to accommodate those types of sales as well. Yeah, sometimes your credit cards can help with that, but the fees can get quite high on international transactions, depending on how they're closed. So be aware of that and work that into your cost structure as well.
Yeah, it's certainly still very new, but some of these digital currencies may lend themselves to that need that Earl just identified. So, and back also what he said, it depends on that market, right? So if you're heavily into something that's technology related, maybe they would be interested in that form of payment as well. But it can be tailored and very specific to the customers you're trying to service. All right, so I'm going to move on to metrics, and this is really the basic key parameters that we want to measure and really know, are your business objectives being met, and what are the company's most critical goals. And we want to look at these both on a short-term basis and on a long-term basis. In other words, hey, what are we trying to achieve this month or maybe even this week? I'd like to get very, very short term, especially at the beginning, because that puts things in perspective. You can set up the long-term metric and say, hey, we're looking to do this year. But until you start bringing that back and start thinking about, well, what does that really mean for this week or maybe even this day? It makes things very real for the entrepreneur, and they start to really focus on those metrics and to drive them. So some examples might be broken down by functional area. It could be, if you're looking at sales, how many items were sold, or the hours that were billed, or maybe even new customers that were added to the database. If you look at it strictly from the finance side, things like your net profit, or maybe your margin, which is what is that percentage? You remember back on the cost structure, we talked about gross profit, which is your sales less what it costs to actually produce and deliver that sale. When you do that ratio, it'll tell you what your gross profit margin is, and that's something that you'll try to improve over time, if possible. Maybe there's some marketing metrics. How many Instagram followers do you have? How many web page views have occurred? And how can you influence those and grow those? On the operational side, it might be things like the percent of on-time deliveries. Did everything get out the door and get delivered to your customer in a timely manner? And also, I mean, you're going to be working with at least multiple partners. So you got your vendors that you're buying your inventory from. You have the shipping companies that we mentioned that are going to be fulfilling that. Perhaps you're even doing some outsourcing for warehousing and order fulfillment. You still have to realize that the customer's coming to you and to your site and to your business, and that they're looking to you to be responsible for everything. So it's not going to really fly just to say, well, the delivery company didn't get there on time, or the item was out of stock, or it didn't get fulfilled properly. Some of those things are indeed beyond your control, but the way that you handle that, the way that you communicate that, and just the challenges are going to be there, and how you handle them are going to be important. So keeping some thought on that as we talk about operational metrics. We want to measure them and not really worry about where the I guess, quote unquote, blame can be placed. It's just taking full responsibility of them, no matter what, as the business owner, and seeing what, if anything, you can do to improve the operational metrics. How can they be measured? It depends on the metric itself, but give it some thought. And is it a specific target? And we want to really not have subjective words there. We don't want to have the word more there. We want to have, what does that mean? How many dollars? How many widgets? How many hours are we going to be billing? Be very specific in your target. And what I put in red at the bottom here is this is a big question, because it's finding what to measure is the first challenge. But then it's really honestly asking yourself, what are you really going to do differently if that metric underperforms? And that's something you have to really give some thought to, because it's if it's struggling, you got to adapt. You got to do something differently. We can't just hope that it's going to change. So you want to think about what is the action that's going to take place if the metric isn't in line with what you're monitoring. So those are critical. You don't need too many of them. Even just even 2 or 3 of them at the beginning is great, just to get a good handle on your business. So we talked through this lean plan canvas document, and as I said at the beginning, it's not a full business plan, but it really does streamline things, and it gets you to be able to go through a business idea and look at everything from that customer viewpoint. Make some tweaks before you get too much further. But then, especially if you're going to bring it to the next level, if you need financing in particular, we need to beef this up a little bit with some external documents to supplement it. So some of the things I have in mind here are, a little bio on yourself as the entrepreneur. What is your management or your advisory team? And those could be the people that are helping you out. If you have a SCORE mentor, if you have a banker, if you have an accountant, your insurance broker, all these people that are part of your team that are helping you and guiding you. Then we talked a little bit about the finances. We went into the cost and we went into the revenue. And these need to be broken out and built up a little bit. So we need to build some more detail for the startup budget. We want to turn those revenue projections into a real 12-month projection schedule. And the same thing with those expenses, making sure we're capturing the fixed and the variable costs. And at this point, after you've gone through it, these items are less scary. You've sort of gone through them, you've understood them a little bit, and now you're just bringing a little bit more detail into them and expanding upon them. There's actually a really nice tool out there that helps us. We talk about the lean canvas for business planning, and the name of it is slipping my mind. Or what am I thinking of for that online lean? No, it's not lean. It's right on the tip of my tongue. It's the other one that does the online business planning from start to finish, and they give you the nice life plans. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, it's right on the tip of my tongue, but. Yeah, the life plan is fantastic if you need to build out some of these, especially when you get into the numbers. And they got a really, really nice interface that allows you to a little bit more easily navigate through that. If you happen to be up and running and have your actual business going, they can even tie into QuickBooks. But not necessary, but I just wanted to put that out there. And thank you for reminding me what the name of that software was. So this is what the tool looks like again. The particular example in here, it's not an e-commerce example, but I think you could still go through it And think about those in light of how we sort of tweak them for e-commerce. But it gives an example of a pest control business. So I'm not going to go through these blocks one by one, but it'll be in the slide deck, and you'll be able to chance to go through these as a actual real example of each one of the blocks and how it may be filled out. So what are the next steps? We've got the next class is going to come up on May 13th. It's also going to be at noontime. And Earl at the from the SBDC is going to do this one for us, and it's going to be e-commerce, finding the right technology. And that one's probably going to be the most in depth of the three workshops. Earl's going to actually get into some of the nuts and bolts. And if you want to sort of chime in and tell us what your overall thoughts are on this one, Earl.
Sure. So a lot of the folks have been asking some questions that center on some of the things we'll be talking about. We're going to be introducing some of the more common platforms and how they might interact with cross-platform marketing, such as one that will be particularly useful to some of the people in the audience today, the Amazon Homemade platform. We will be talking about some of the analytics tools. So where we were talking about doing those measurements and making those decisions, seeing how effective we are. We'll show you some of the tools you can use to do that. Search engine optimization. You can't have a technology class on e-commerce without talking about SEO. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Outbound marketing, some of the tools you can use for that as well. And then of course, cybersecurity, which is a big part of not only keeping yourself safe, but keep maintaining your reputation, your credibility out there so you can continue to sell for the long term. So those are just some of the things we'll be talking about.
That's exciting. There's going to be a lot of detail there. Highly recommend everybody check that one out next month. So here's the contact information for the three of us. It'll, again, the slide deck will be sent out to everybody, so you'll get a chance to review that. And apologize for running a little bit over. We're about 7 minutes over, but not too bad. I'm going to also pause here and give an opportunity for a few more minutes for some more questions, if there are any.
Well, while y'all are looking at the questions, I just want to mention too that while this series is more of a broad overview on e-commerce business, each of the programs, SCORE, Women's Business Center, and the SBDC have many more workshops that are much more in depth. For example, on the 21st, there's a Marketing 101, creating a plan. There's a small business tax workshop on state taxes, federal tax. The Women's Business Center Cafe Friday is on the 23rd. And then, Jerry, I think you have something. Yeah, SCORE has everything you need to know about Google My Business on the 28th. So go to each of these organizations' websites and look for their events, because there's more than enough information out there to get you through, to get you up and running successfully.
Yeah, e-commerce is just a vehicle. There is a business behind that.
Right.
And you need to know how to run that part of it. So we're here for that too.
Yep.
So Earl, are you going to take the questions?
Yeah, I noticed that a good point was made about PayPal and make sure you're reading the terms. I could say that about any of the gateway programs or the payment platforms that you might consider. Make sure you're reading the fine print. Make sure you're understanding how the process works. Even with just a simple merchant account through a bank, you need to understand who's getting charged what at what time, who holds the bag if somebody decides they're not going to pay, they're going to return that charge. If you don't understand those nuances behind your payment platforms, you could really be signing yourself up for a very expensive lesson there. So make sure you're reading those ahead of time. Some folks are asking about the timing. The programs have all started at noon Eastern time. So the last one will do the same. I didn't see any other questions. Did I miss anything there, Anna or Jerry or Aaron?
I just wanted to share with Felicia, Jerry, I'm sorry, you did mention you would be able to send out the recording as well, because she asked if
yes.
she asked if it would be available in writing, so I think the recording would be great for her.
Yeah, so just give me a couple of days on that, Felicia. I do plan on getting this up on our YouTube channel. But what I'll do is probably sometime this afternoon or later tomorrow, I'm going to send out the slide deck, so you'll have the PowerPoint presentation and also a copy of that Word document that has the Lean Canvas template. So then also keep in mind that that SCORE is here. If anybody wants to sort of request a mentor to help with your small business and help guide you through this tool, you can go to our website, piedmont.score.org, request a mentor link, and that'll we're here to sort of personally one-on-one help you through that as well. All right, I think that at this point we'll go ahead and wrap it up then. And I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to attend. Thanks, Earl. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Aaron, for participating. And everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Jerry.
Great hosting.